Hey everybody, this is my video presentation for History of Great Britain subject. Here we will meet two personalities, James I and Charles I. We will find out something about their characters and some facts about their lives. First king we will talk about will be James I. So, who was this James I? James I, also known as James IV, was King of England and King of Scotland. These two kingdoms were individual states with their own laws, though both of them were ruled by him. Now I will tell you a bit more about James I. James was the only son of Mary, Queen of Scots. He was born on 19th June 1566 at Edinburgh Castle. The opportunity to have throne of England became in the future one of the main political features of James I. Couple months after James' birth, his father was murdered by suspicious circumstances. There is a fact that it was his mother, Mary, with her lover, James Hepburn, who killed him. After that, there was a rebellion against Mary, so she had to give the throne of England to his son, who was almost 1 year. 1 year. Seriously? In 1567, James got the throne of England. And I think I don't have to tell why I wear the crown. James Stuart, again James, was a regent of young king who helped him to rule. He wanted to approach England in the political way, but his glory lasted not very long because he was killed by Mary's supporters. After his death, there was a civil war in Scotland between King James and his mother. There were a lot of regents of that period for James, but other cities supported James and he won that war, after what Mary's supporters accepted James as a King James IV. After war, there is a peace in Scotland and young king set the discipline on his lands. During his youth, James wasn't much interested in women. He preferred male companies. However, he needed successful marriage to make his monarchy strong, and he chose 14-year-old Anne of Denmark. At first, Anne attracted James, and it seems that she showed her love and patience. Also, they produced 3 children: Henry Frederick, who died of fever aged 18, Elizabeth, later Queen of Bohemia, and Charles, James' successor. But unfortunately, soon Anne died. James visited Denmark, the country familiar of witch hunts, so he got interested in studying of witchcraft, and he considered it to be the branch of theology. He took part in North Berwick competition, and he caught some people who was defined as using black magic and sending storm against James' ship. James became obsessed by witch magic, and he even wrote the book which was called Demonology. This book taught how to avoid witches' magic. He even wrote an official letter to his kids where he asked to go on with father's witches' hunting hobby. In 1597, he wrote The True Law of Free Monarchies, in which he argued about monarchy basis using biblical reasons. Basilicon Doron, also known as Royal Gift, was written for 4-year-old son Henry to guide him to kingship. This book was written very well, and perhaps this is the best James bookwork. James saw his daughter as the most likely person to the English throne, but unfortunately she died and he proclaimed a king of England. But there was some problems about it. The kingdom of England was in debt of 400,000 pounds. That's actually a lot. Anyway, James was ambitious to build the personal union of the crowns of Scotland to establish a single country under one monarch, one parliament, and one law. About age of 50, James suffered from arthritis. Actually, it's a terrible disease. It's when you have muscles hurted. He also lost his teeth and drank heavily. King was seriously often ill, and he died in Theobald's house during the violent attack of dysentery. So now in general about his personality. James was one of the most well-educated people at that time. He knew not only Latin language, but ancient Greek. He wrote the poems in Scottish language. During his reign, Shakespeare was famous. He was loved by people despite of this violence in which he grew up. So that's all about James I, King of England. And now we will talk about Charles I. So what tells us this personality? Charles I was the monarch of three kingdoms: Ireland, Scotland and England. His policy and church reforms cost him an invasion and English Civil War. During this war he failed and he was put to death. So...
Hey, stop! You look different? Why?
Well, I think that each kings deserve my individual attention, so I look different. Besides the crown. Crown is very important. So, now I will tell a bit more facts about this king. He was the second child of already known by us James I king and Anne of Denmark. Charles was born in Dunfermline Palace in Scotland on 19th November 1600. Charles was a very weak and sickly child, and while his parents and siblings went to England, he was considered to be not so strong enough to make journeys due to his weak health. By 1604, Charles was 3½, and he was able to walk through the great hall of palace without assistance. It was decided that he was now strong enough to make journeys and to be reunited with his family. His speech development was also slow. He retained a stammer for the rest of his life. In 1605, Charles was created a Knight of the Bath. Thomas Murray was his tutor, and Charles learned the usual subjects like classics, languages, mathematics, religion. In 1611 he was a Knight of a Garter. Да, это рыцарь ордена подвязки. Charles conquered his physical weakness. He became a good horseman and marksman. Even so, he was not as valued as his physically stronger and taller elder brother, Henry, Prince of Wales, whom Charles adored and tried to be like him. But when Charles was 12, his brother died at the age of 18, so he became a heir apparent. 4 years later, in 1616, he was created Prince of Wales and Earl of Chester. In 1625, Charles was married to Henrietta Maria in front of the doors of Notre Dame de Paris. His policy was directed on king power, and it was even more important than a church. Unlike his father, Charles didn't know well Scotland, and among his supporters there were no Scotsmen at all. He attracted as a high servant a lot of bishops. He created parliament, which was marked in history as long, but this parliament tried to be over the king, so it almost succeeded. Charles gave up and decided to start a war. During war, he lost his army, so he went to Scotland and hoped he would get a helping hand. But no, he was caught and betrayed. He refused to lose the war. He still hoped he would win. When he was said that he got the power by means of his people and he used it against the people, he just answered, "I got the power from the gods and I used it against my enemies." Parliament declared that Charles I Stuart was a despot, murderer and an enemy of England and put him to death. They gave him 3 days to get ready to death. He spent this time for praying with his bishop. Up until the end he kept this courage. So in 1649 he was executed, and in a few days Parliament cancelled his monarchy and proclaimed republic. So okay, one more time in general about his personality. Charles had no problems neither with his military skills nor with his courage. However, his habit to be rude made people avoid him. The main thing which betrayed him was wrong choice of tone. So in cases he needed to be strong, he was weak, and in contrary. He never understood the personalities of people he had to fight with, and he never understood the wishes of people he ruled. But anyway, his life was kinda perfect. He had a good taste in literature and art. He never behaved with siblings as king. He was very different with them, and he didn't keep his promises. By the way, in honor of Charles I was called the state of USA, South Carolina. So that's all about Charles I and James I. I really hope you find my work interesting. And in the end, I want to say that do love history, do learn history, because history is the diary of mankind. Bye!